the last question, please.
Yeah. Early on in this discourse, you mentioned creating a legitimate legal system, and then as trying to piece things together, it seems like there's a place to talk about the mechanism by which reason is managed. A collective consultative authority, if you will. And maybe that hasn't evolved yet, but that it's certainly there are scholars as yourselves that are doing great reasoning, but then how is a collective reason decided upon?
Well, no, I mean, Wa al-Hallaq, who's a very well-known professor of Islamic law, as well as people like George Maqdisi and so on, have written a great deal about the social, historical institutions that existed that negotiated sort of the processes from theology to legal philosophy to the production of an instrumental law in society that is at one point or another implemented by courts. And also I should add, my colleague was at USC now, Sherman Jackson. And I'll add my name to the list because I've written about that. But with colonialism, most of these institutions have been, because they were all based on private endowments, not controlled by the state, and that funded the schools of theology, the schools of law, and that also gave judges the ability to refuse service or resign their post and have a way of living, a livelihood from the private endowments. So in other words, deviating or dissenting from the state was not the end of life. This whole edifice ended with colonialism, and states in every Muslim country controls now the endowments, the state-owned property, and there have been influence by the French tradition emerging of the schools of theology and law in one, and for all practical purposes, the death of the classical Islamic legal institutions and the death of a classical Islamic law as it manifested historically. And the contemporary manifestations of Islamic law are often very poorly embedded in the philosophical tradition, very poorly embedded in the theological tradition. Quite often they embed themselves in the grammatical tradition, a knowledge of Arabic grammar. Although I have to say that a lot of Azhari sheikhs make horrendous grammar mistakes. And for a variety of reasons, this literalist, now a very literalist reading of the classical tradition, but also a schizophrenia, because at the same time that Azhar has said that if you deny any of the hudud, any of the criminal penalties, such as severing the hands or stoning the adulterer, or you are no longer a part of Islam, in repeated fatwas said this is ma'loom min ad-din bid-darura, this is something that is a core of religion, so you are no longer a Muslim. Azhar itself has not asked for the implementations of the hudud penalties in 100 years or more. And if you talk to Azhari sheikhs, they say, no, that's something out of the question. And in fact, we'll say to the kids who join groups that want to implement these penalties, you are deviants from the faith, and sometimes even death, sign off on the death warrants when they are, the government sentences them to death for joining one group or another. This is an ongoing process that is in every Muslim country, and it has created a deep social schizophrenia that plagues every Muslim country that I know of. So the historical social institutions that sort of created a process of consensus about the boundaries of what is reasonable and what is outside the realm of reason, sort of the Gadamer type of philosophical paradigm where you have a tradition of meaning, have been deconstructed with a very chaotic, often brutal institutional processes replacing it with no end in sight. I mean, one of the things, this is very interesting, a lot of the people who join ISIS are Tunisians. Now, it's very interesting because Tunisia is often cited as the one country that succeeded with the Arab Spring. But the reason that a lot of Tunisians join ISIS, a lot of young Tunisian kids, is in fact because of the complete crushing of the dream of self-determination in Tunisia itself. The Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, supported by the United States, England, and France, made sure that the old guard comes through the persona of a Sipsi, who's senile. Sipsi is a very problematic character at every. And when you talk to young Tunisians, the sense of absolute alienation, say, you know, we really dreamt about democracy and we discovered the world would never allow us democracy. And they resolved that despair by going and committing suicide. Effectively, it's an act of suicide. Joining ISIS and saying we you know, kiss their parents and family, you know, pray that I become a martyr and that I don't survive. Same thing with a lot of Egyptians. And this is the tragedy, the human drama that stimulates, that inspires me to keep trying, and to keep trying to break from this impasse since colonialism between the old and, you know, call it westernized elite that often believes that they have the right to impose a wasaya, help me with the word wasaya.
Guardianship. Guardianship?
Yeah, a guardianship, that's right. A guardianship over the rest of the population. Because the rest of the population is stupid and reactionary and backwards and et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, I've laid myself bare before you. What drives me, what I hope for, of course, it's not going to happen in my lifetime, and there's a lot of more blood that's going to be spilled because I'm such a cheerful and optimistic person. I want to leave you on that note. Thousands of people are going to die, and more and more and more and more people are going to die and be slaughtered, and bloods will flow. Before we get in our mind, we need a fundamental epistemic shift. And who knows when that historical moment comes and what shape it takes. You know, I'm such a cheery person, and that's why my wife loves me for that.
On a more cheerful note, let's thank Professor Abou El Fadl.
I wish I would go.